So our next speaker is James Driver. He's a psychotherapist. What's a psychotherapist doing talking at a climate change meeting, you might ask? Well, I know a lot of us are getting anxious about climate change, and I get anxious about it. You know, I keep reading the news, I look at the floods in Pakistan, I think, am I doing enough? What are my grandkids going to have to put up with? I've had an incredibly privileged life, and it's not going to be the same for my kids and grandkids, and what can I do about it? You know, it's such a big thing, it's so complicated. And so James is going to tell us a little bit about how do we manage that anxiety. He's got a master's in psychotherapy, and he deals with many different types of psychological challenges we're facing, you know, in the world today, in this turbulent world. So, James, over to you, understanding and managing climate anxiety. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Can you hear me okay? Yep. Great. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak to a topic that I feel quite passionately about. With so many of us and our young people affected by climate anxiety, it's more important than ever that we understand it and learn how to manage it, because doing so can be the difference between a life lived in fear and uncertainty and one lived with passion and commitment, and perhaps a better future for our world. The first step is to recognise that our anxiety is not unreasonable. Feeling fear in the face of an existential threat is an understandable response. We need to allow ourselves to be okay with feeling our fear, our anger, our grief. These feelings are part of what makes us human and can be part of what motivates us to take action. At the same time, it's important to understand how they affect us. Anxiety in particular comes from a system in our brain geared towards self-preservation. And when that system is overactivated, we experience the fight, flight, or freeze response. This can trigger hostility or a desire to isolate and protect ourselves at the expense of others, an impulse to stick our head in the sand, distract ourselves, or to feel helpless, overwhelmed, and paralyzed. Anxiety also pushes us towards absolute black and white thinking. When there's uncertainty about the future, we don't know what to do or how to plan, and so our brain tries to convince us of a definite vision of what will happen. This can lead either to denial or to excessive fatalism, the idea that we're doomed and there's nothing we can do about it. Although it can feel terrible to take this doomed perspective, our mind can prefer a horrible certainty over an unknown future, but neither denial or fatalism are realistic or helpful to us. There are many possible futures ahead, and we can have a role in shaping them. We need to understand that our instinctive response to anxiety, though it feels natural and as if it's trying to protect us, is instead doing the opposite. The more we hide away and try to ignore or disconnect from others in an effort to protect ourselves, the greater our fear becomes. Instead, we need to do the opposite of what our fear might have us do, to move towards action and connection. One of the greatest things we can do to combat our anxiety is to recognize that whatever the future holds, we do not have to be alone in facing it. People have faced terrible adversity throughout human history, and those who have fared best are those who have come together, collaborated, supported each other, and tackled the challenge head on. We can start now to form connections, strengthen communities, and talk to each other about this, really share our fears and hopes for the future. So many people here and around the world are already thinking, talking, and working to create better climate outcomes, and we have the opportunity right now to join the greatest movement in any of our lifetimes. Anxiety can become debilitating when we try and manage it alone, but can become tolerable when held within a group. For our children, we need to help them with their fear, grief, and anger by listening and validating those experiences, to let them know that they're normal and that they're not alone, to help them think realistically about a future that they can be a part of. No, it may not look like the life and past we've known, but perhaps in that loss there can also be the growth of new ideas and new possibilities. The climate crisis is making it clear that our old systems and ways of doing things have failed. There's no longer a possibility of life continuing as normal, and it's terrifying to leave behind what we've known. But those systems were failing us long before the climate crisis became so apparent. Perhaps now we have the catalyst for creating something better. Faced with the climate crisis, it's easy to slip into thinking, what can I as a single person do in the face of such an enormous issue? But thankfully, the answer to that's simple. Any caring, pro-environment, pro-community action will help, and there are countless things that need doing. It's important to take action that's sustainable. We're in this for the long haul. And to that end, I love the idea of a climate Venn diagram created by Ayana Elizabeth Johnson as a way to find our own place in the climate movement. The idea is pretty simple. Make a list of what you're good at and be generous to yourself here, because we all have valuable skills. A list of what needs doing to address climate change, and a list of what brings you joy, passion, and try and find the things that fall within all three categories. Yes, we need activists and protesters, climate-focused politicians and policy makers, but not everybody has the skill or desire to do those things, and there's so much more that needs doing. Perhaps you're more valuable shaking things up within your current organisation, pushing them to become carbon neutral, or perhaps you're good at persuading or inspiring others through art, or perhaps you are the sort of person that likes throwing a wrench into the machinery and would be best on the front lines of a civil disobedience action. We each have a role to play, and I can't emphasise enough that any action is better than none. Lastly, we need to be kind to ourselves and each other. Research has clearly shown that shame, guilt, criticism are not effective motivators. Yes, we should aspire to get involved and take action, but there's no value beating ourselves up when we fall short or criticising others. Similarly, we should be thoughtful about our media and news consumption. It can feel important to stay up to date with global reporting on climate change, but we should check in with ourselves about how it's really affecting us. If reading more is helping us, making us feel energised for action, great, keep at it. But if we've already accepted the urgency of the problem and reading more is pushing us into despair and hopelessness, perhaps we should get offline and out into the world. And that's where I'll finish, because the final thing that can help with our climate anxiety is getting out and engaging with nature. The world's still there, still beautiful, and some of that beauty can still be saved. Get out there, appreciate it, and join us in the fight to keep it for all of our futures. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I really appreciated that. I wonder if I could have my next slide then, because there was a question that came through from the audience, which I think was appropriate for James. James, what is one key change that as a community we can collectively make and to measure our success rate? Over to you.
Yeah, sure, that is a good question. And to be honest, I'm probably not the best person to answer, because I think the most important thing is that it's, people within the local community that identify what's most needed there. So I certainly think that, the strategy team there has a role in, hopefully working with people after this event to identify what some of the most important changes might be. And I think the other, point from my talk is that each person's role in that might be quite different. It's really important to come together as a community, but in terms of the action we take, that can look quite different from one person to the next. And so I think it's crucial that we find ways to connect and to allow people to fulfill those different roles, given their particular strengths and their abilities.
Yeah, thanks for that, for James, because I know for myself I sometimes find I'm waiting for some big thing that I can engage with to make a difference, but there's actually little things we can do on a day-to-day basis, and I think we need to just get started. Is that sort of get started on the journey? Is that important?
Absolutely. I think just starting to take action, because as you do that, you'll find that you're meeting people, you're sharing ideas, you start talking, new ideas come up, new initiatives, new possibilities, become more evident as you actually start taking action. If we just sit at home in our room reading, trying to work it out on our own, we could spend forever trying to work out, the best thing to do or the right thing to do. But if we actually just get out there and start doing, we're going to feel better, we're going to find new opportunities, and we're going to come together more as a community. So absolutely, I think just taking any action is the best place to start.
Hey, thanks for that, James. Now, James has put a written version, or we've put a written version of his presentation excuse me, on the Timaru District Council website, and it also includes a list of organisations that are already working in sustainability, climate change in our area. So that's a resource we can tap into. So thanks very much, James. I really appreciate that. So it comes down to, well, who knows what? I mean, we've seen that this is an incredibly complex topic, isn't it? And our speakers have shared a lot of really valuable knowledge with us tonight. But no one has all the answers, and if anybody thinks they do, they're kidding themselves and us. We have to bring all our wisdom together. We need to share tonight's knowledge with our local knowledge, and I really want to emphasise that, and this is where we're going to be listening to some local speakers shortly. Because what happens in the Pariora River is not the same as what's going to happen in the Opahi or the Rangitata or the Ashburton. We've got to get specific, and that's what our council is wanting us to do as a community, develop the strategies, understand our local issues and work out how to act on them. So slides, thanks. So we're going to have speakers on climate-friendly actions that are already happening here. Most of us don't know about them. When I started this journey, I interviewed 50 leaders around the community, and I was blown away by the amount of stuff that's already going on. I could have had dozens of speakers here tonight talking about what's happening in our district. Each speaker is talking about something quite different. They've got just 4 minutes. It's very challenging, and I've got a manuka stick there that I'm going to wave at them. It's not quite Gandalf's, what do you call it? But anyway, it's still pretty threatening. It's my dad's actually. So they've got 4 minutes to tell us their very challenging stories. We're emphasising the range of topics, so each speaker's only been given a short amount of time so we can move on to the next speaker. And what we're going to discover, I think, is that climate action is actually becoming the new normal. There are so many people doing it, big scale, small scale. So the first speaker tonight is Kaia George, Deputy Head Girl at Timaru Girls High. Very deep interest in climate change. I've had some great conversations with her. She takes this stuff really seriously, and so do a lot of her young people. And as a key point, young people are going to bear the brunt of climate change. It's not going to affect me a great deal. I can cruise through to the end of my life. She'll be right, mate. But it's going to affect my kids and my grandkids. Most of those young people haven't contributed to the problem, and they've got very, very little influence over it. So, Kaia, wherever you are, I can't see you out there, but if you could come forward and share your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kaia George, and I'm the Deputy Head Girl of Timaru Girls High School. Tonight, I am providing you with the youth perspective upon climate change. However, I cannot provide you with just my perspective. In the previous week, I sent out a survey to the students of Timaru Girls High School to get their perspectives as well. The results are as follows. The first question I asked them was, do you think climate change is currently affecting you? 27.4% of people said yes, 35.5% said slightly, 16.1% said no, 14.5% were unsure about the effects of climate change, and 6.5% said they didn't care. The second question I asked was, do you think that climate change is going to be an issue in the future? 75.8% of them said yes, 8.1% said maybe, 8.1% again said they were unsure about the effects of climate change, and 4.8% said no, and 3.2% said they didn't care. The third question I asked was, do you want to help reduce the effect of climate change? 59.7% of them said yes. 30.6% said maybe, 6.5% didn't care, and 3.2% said no. The final question I asked was, are you unsure how to help in reducing climate change? 56.5% agreed and said yes. 24.2% said no. 8.1% didn't care. 9.6% said kind of. And 1.6% or one person added the other option and said, actions of individuals are insignificant compared to large groups of people and large companies. I'm not sure how anything I alone do or don't do will be significant unless it involves including other people in some sense. This data tells me that a majority of youth are willing to help reduce climate change in the future, but are unsure of how to do so. They think it is affecting them slightly, but not enough for it to be obvious. They think it is, a few of the students also added extra answers to further develop their points. One person said, it's affecting me because it's affecting my home country, Kiribati. I also think that soon enough climate change will go to affect other small Pacific countries similar to Kiribati. This person already is aware that climate change is affecting not only them, but a majority of Pacific countries. Another person said that I am aware if climate change is affecting me, as aside from doing assessments that include climate change, I don't believe I've had any direct effects myself yet. Climate change is already an issue. If it keeps up at its current rate, it will affect us all. This informs us that climate change has been minimally taught in schools and is widely known that it is an issue. My generation and younger generations have heard the term climate change. However, less know the cause and impact it is going to have in the future. We need a clear description of what we need to do to limit the effects of climate change. We all know there is no straight or easy answer. There are things we need to do and things we need to stop doing. We are anxious about a future in terms of climate change. We want to help in reducing the anxiety while we still can. We have strong voices that sometimes just want to be heard. The question is, now, how can we help? Thank you for listening.
Well, if anybody had any doubts about giving young people the vote, I hope you haven't got any doubts anymore. Kaia, that was fantastic. Thank you very much indeed. Really appreciate that. I'm quite emotional. Thank you. Gary, are you out there somewhere? There he is. Gary Aitkin, Temuka Transport. When I went out to see Gary, I thought he's transport, he won't want to know about climate change. I was blown away when I met Gary. I had about an hour and a half with him. He wouldn't let me go. He's taking his climate change responsibilities really seriously. We can't just take trucks off the road unless you don't want your food in the supermarket. You've got one hell of a challenge. Go for it.
This will be one of the hardest 4 minutes because Phil, when he said, look, you'll only be talking to a small audience of about 10 or 12 people. There's a wee bit of bullshit here, so that's fine. Excuse the language. Hey, look, team, climate change is a big thing, and we had a fantastic discussion, and where it starts is we've got a company of 240 odd employees and 150 odd trucks, and the impact that we can save by just making little steps is massive, and we don't need to concentrate on the big picture of making change immediately. It needs to be the education process of getting through to our staff how to drive the trucks to a sustainable level. Start with the small steps, work with our developers offshore with the Volvo brand that we're tied up with, and everyone's got their own preference, but get deep into their heart, find out where they're investing, because we've got so much technology that's going to change in the future that we do not know whether it's going to be solar that's going to provide the power, hydro. We've also got the fossil fuel that's probably going to remain for some time to come, but on a limited spectrum, and there's going to be the hybrid, obviously, with the hydrogen and everything coming. It's developing the breed that's actually going to suit our environment, because we are so different to Australia, the Americas, the Canadas, and even to the European countries where they've got expressways where they can run direct. We've got 35 kilometre an hour corners, 45. We've got all those other hassles of the Hunterleys. We've got no State Highway 1 is going to give you the practicability of trialling those vehicles successfully until such time as we've developed a code of conduct that's going to work for the heavy industry game. We've got clients, I'm fortunate enough to be tied up with the port infrastructure, and it's probably one of the best ports for turnaround times in the country, so please don't bag our port. You've got LPC with congestion now. Studies have been done in Christchurch. I think CCC's got 15 million to develop Brougham Street because we've got congestion of traffic. You do the study on the trucks that are coming and going from that port, and 50% utilisation is a number that we should not be proud of. We've got to get that utilisation of the assets to sing a song and to come back up, and take away the colours, take away the breed, take away everything else. We've got to start uniting all of our customer base together. It's not just about containers going to export, it's actually about the agricultural sector, the logging sector, the environmental sector. Everything has got to start growing together. And people have got to take a more practical approach to delivering that, because it's not what I can do, it's what we can all do. And I think that's one of the things that we've got to make sure that we live on and we breathe and take a bit of pride away. Our companies can survive united together. It doesn't matter, but it's actually about making sure the mentality is reaching those goals, because individuals doing that, you look out here, we've all got a different vehicle, different makes, models, there's bikes, there's skateboards, there's everything out there. But when you sit down and realistically say, what is the best mode of transport to get here, you actually question yourself, and this defence comes up and throws it back in your face. So Temuka Transport, I'm 115 kilos, I can't sprint, so we're going to take a nice slow approach to gain the right traction to make sure we can deliver. I'm sharing technology with the Hilton Haulages of South Canterbury is another major player. We're sharing with the Richardson Group with their intel into the hydrogen market. We're not going to be left behind, but we're just taking a cautious approach to deliver. Now, I was just talking to a lovely lady there, just while we're having a 5-minute break, Phil, and one of the stats that our fantastic speakers from previous in the presentations, 75% is coming from metropolitan and urban areas. That's a massive stat, you know, and we need to make sure that we don't contribute to that. And if EV vehicles are going to be the way around metropolitan and urban areas, then we need to start concentrating on that early. And that's with our developers. It's not so much individuals, because customers are still going to pay. But if we can keep the costs and just drive it, that it's a gradual process, then I think we've all got a future together. So guys, I'm not going to ramble on. We are very, very proud of South Canterbury. We're very, very proud of our region. We are Ocean to Alps. And this is not a plug for our Temuka group, but we've got the Barwoods model up in Fairlie. We've got the Twizel model with Mackenzie Supplies, and we've obviously got the Temuka model, but we've got the diverse range to sit down and make sure our decision to step into the future has got to be the right one. So Phil, I'll save your time, mate. Just bring the next one up.
I think Gary hit on a point that Nigel Davenport's going to come on to a bit later on about companies working together. And there's all this stuff going on as these companies sharing information and trying to do better every day, not trying to fix it overnight. That is just too hard. So thanks ever so much for that. Next slide. This is an interesting one. How many days would a fit person need to work to do the same amount of work that can be squeezed out of 1 barrel of oil? So oil gets refined into diesel and petrol, and it goes into tractors, and it does a whole lot of work. And if you replace that with humans, how many days would a person have to work to achieve the work you can get out of a barrel of oil? I need days. How many? 3? That's 90 days, isn't it? Here. 200 days. 400 at the back. Anybody else? 1,500. Wee bit high. 1,200, bit high. 700. Too low. Who said 1,000? Put your hand up. Down here. Bingo. 966 days a person would have to work So your barrel of oil costs $150. To employ a person for 966 days is $194,000. That's why it's so hard to give up fossil fuels. Fossil fuels are just eye-wateringly powerful, what you can do with them. So how are we going to do that? If we've got a 1,000 horsepower tractor out there, you're going to need 1,000 men to replace it. And I'm not trying to be doom and despair on this thing, I'm just talking about the scale of the challenge we're addressing. So Nigel, good timing to come to you. Now, Nigel has probably got the biggest challenge of everybody tonight because he's got so many stories to tell. He's working with a whole bunch of companies, with research organisations, government departments, you name it. So Nigel, I don't know if you can fit it in, but
I'll talk quick.
give it a go, mate.
Yeah. Don't wave your stick too much, so. Richard Spackman down the back just wanted the definition of what work was too, by the way. So. Hey, look. Thanks for the opportunity to pop along today or tonight.
So we lost your background on this slide.
Oh, that's all right.
To save energy in terms
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. That's enough. You're cutting into my talking time now. Look, South Canterbury is home to the largest and most diverse range of food processors and manufacturers in a geographically close location than anywhere else in New Zealand. As a result of that, and I use the term endearingly, they are one of our largest wasters or byproduct manufacturers, but they're also our largest group of energy users as well. So the first initiative I want to talk about in relation to both of those, the two bookends I call them, waste and energy, is sustainable as attainable. So this is a collaborative approach to sustainable waste and byproduct management with the food processing and manufacturing industry locally. It's a collaboration of over 20 plus of our local food processors and manufacturers. There's a few here in the room this evening, and it's actually unprecedented in New Zealand. This collaborative came together about 3 years ago, and if you flick on to the next slide, oh, keep flicking, flick, and stop. So just pictorially, down the bottom, the South Canterbury food processors and manufacturers, there's a number of them there, all different shapes and sizes. They saw the need to collaborate. It's come out pretty clearly in the conversation so far, trusting each other, the sharing of information. They appointed us as the Economic Development Agency as their conduit into the academia world. With the greatest respect to the academia world, they didn't want to hear from R&D and academic every day of the week. They wanted them to grab that information that they've got and don't be busy fools with it, fold it into other work that's being done around the country as well. So the ultimate aim with this was to investigate, or is, because it's ongoing, investigate sustainable opportunities and global best practices associated with prevention and minimisation of waste and byproducts, value extraction, energy recovery, alternative uses, and all of those sorts of things that come with it. Biological waste, plastics are two of the big streams, and as you can see, the University of Canterbury, the great team up there in their biomolecular unit, is the conduit into the academia world, the R&Ds like ESR, ag research, etc., the universities, and also obviously the important government agencies around MPI, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, Minister for the Environment, etc. as well. So this initiative is now nationally recognised. We've recently expanded it into the Hawke's Bay, so we have similar but slightly different, both in central parts of our respective islands. And we're talking with Nelson, Tasman and Taranaki as well. There's no secret to this. The role that VT have played, this is industry-led. They are serious about doing some good in this space, and they're in the room for the right reasons. They're not there to tick the box and pat themselves on the back. They are there to make significant change together. And their mantra is, don't let an opportunity go to waste. The other one I want to talk about is off the back of this Sustainable as Attainable collaboration. It's been the catalyst and the foundation of which the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Authority, or ECA, have rolled out their Regional Energy Transition Accelerator program. You may have heard of their Energy Transition Accelerator program, where they've been dealing with individual companies or large process heat users throughout the country. We've been talking to them for about a year, saying that they're potentially setting themselves up for a bit of a trip in dealing individually with these large process heat users, as they may all head down the track of converting from coal through to biomass, and then suddenly the demand for biomass is here and the supply is here. They agreed that a regional approach, looking over the top and coming down into our, you can flick on to the next slide, sorry, Tristan. Sorry, that's an example of some of the entities up in the Hawke's Bay through Sustainable's Attainable. You can flick on. Thank you. So we're the second region in the country. It's called the South and Mid Canterbury Regional Energy Transition Accelerator to be involved with this. And the focus of this is working with industry, iwi, lines companies, key regional stakeholders to collaboratively decarbonise process heat in the region. Some businesses are well on the way, others are only just starting, some are planning to start, some haven't even looked at it. So the idea with this is that it's a regional stocktake of where everyone is at in relation to the decarbonisation of their process heat, and then put a line in the sand and then forecast forward, look at the various supply, demand, costs, assessments of the different energy sources, including things like solar, as you see down the bottom, solar, wave, biodigesters, biomass, straight electricity off the lines as well. So this is a real game changer for our area, being the second cab off the rank, and it's not just a report that's going to be produced. It is a report that will then identify what this area should be famous for, what should go where and why. As importantly, the next step is, here is the central government funding to implement, alongside introductions to national and international companies that are wanting to invest in this sustainable energy space in New Zealand. The beauty with these two bookends, I call them, is the opportunity for us in the central South Island, and I'm talking Waitaki through to mid-Canterbury and right into the mountains, is that we can be famous for something pretty special in a pretty quick way. So that ends my talk. I don't know how my 4 minutes are going, but the one thing I will do, Phil, is provide you with there are a couple of local companies that are well on the way and well through their decarbonisation, in DB Heineken and McCain. They were both finalists in the ECA Large Business Awards. There were 3 finalists about a month ago. The other one was Auckland Transport, and yes, you guessed it, we beat them hands down. McCain took out the award, followed very closely by DB Heineken, but that information around some of the decarbonisation that they have done already and leading the way for others is pretty impressive. So thanks for your time. As I say, I could go on a bit longer, but that gives you a bit of a feel for it as well.
Thank you so much. That's fantastic. Don't you love Nigel's enthusiasm? I think it's great. And that's what you get from the companies as well. And his comments about this is what South Canterbury can be famous for. It's not something that we necessarily need to feel weak and depressed. We can actually grab some of this and make it work. And these companies are doing it. We've got to work out how to do that for us as individuals as well. So, sorry. Our next speaker is Carolyn Cooper. Are you there, Carolyn? Just here, right? Yes, you are. So Carolyn heads Presbyterian Support Service in Timaru. And one of the messages we've heard over and over again is it's the vulnerable people that are going to be most affected by climate change. They often live in areas where there aren't any trees. It's an urban area, so it gets really hot. And there was a study done in the USA where there were 2 streets that were identical, except one had trees and one didn't. And on a hot day, the street with no trees was 10 degrees hotter than the one that had trees. Guess who lived in the street that didn't have the trees? It was the vulnerable people. So, Carolyn, you're tuned into the Timaru environment. I'm not quite sure what your topic will be, but I know you care about vulnerable people. So, over to you.
I am going to go slightly off topic, but not too much. To talk about vulnerable people in the community. I'm going to talk about older people because that's the area that I know, and I've worked with aged care for over 20 years. So yeah, well, it will work for everybody in a minute. It's important to note, though, that not every older person is vulnerable, and those that actually are vulnerable may not actually see themselves as vulnerable. And just to give you something to think about, the World Health Organization believes that most developed world countries characterise old age as starting at 60. So that's a sobering thought for most of you in the room, including me. Okay, so older people have a very good reason to want to halt or even reverse climate change. It's a very personal reason. It's a simple reason. Climate change is a killer, particularly for the elderly. Older people, particularly those with disabilities such as dementia, Parkinson's, diabetes, heart problems, they're among those affected by climate-related harm, such as increasing spread of vector-borne disease. We saw that with COVID, heat stress, increasing frequency and intensity of sudden and onset disasters, which can impact their physical and mental health and well-being. With extreme weather and disasters, elderly people will be disproportionately affected. Nearly half of the individuals who died during Hurricane Katrina in 2005 were 75 or over. When Hurricane Sandy hit New York, almost half of those who died were 65 and over. So many older people find it hard to move around or to use transport. It's hard for them to leave quickly if they're in danger. And there isn't a family around like there used to be, and even at times there's not a lot of community around. Blackouts are particularly dangerous. In one of those hurricanes, older people were caught in lifts with no power, and they were stuck. You can't use an electric scooter if it's not charged enough, phones, wheelchairs, refrigerator for medications, your call bells, your alarm systems, they all rely on power, so blackouts are a dangerous time for older people. There are many older people in New Zealand living on their own with little or no help, and they're slowly losing contact with the outside world. They can't afford to heat or cool their large houses, often living in 1 or 2 rooms because the rest of the house is too big for them. They often have log burners or open fires, and they struggle to manage those. They still have petrol cars because they can't afford the alternatives. Let's face it, electric is the way to go, but most of these people can't afford to go out and buy an electric car. Then they have to figure out how to plug it in and how to keep it going. It's not easy. Some of them shouldn't be driving, but that's their last source. That's their last source of independence. They've got their lovely big veggie gardens going to rack and ruin because either they're too big or they can't manage them. The families are overseas. So you might ask, how can these people help with climate change and global warming? I'm going to be really clear here. Being vulnerable doesn't make you useless. Yet in today's society, older people are often seen this way. We've got to push past this way of thinking and include the elderly in any plans we make as a community. We need to harness their knowledge. I found this statement among many pieces I've read lately on the elderly and climate change. It simply said, when it comes to discussing climate change, older people may have one advantage. They've watched it happen. But also, this is the generation who grew up with having to make do. Everyone had a garden. Everyone knew their neighbours and who needed help. Sewing, cooking, preserving, baking, home repairs, DIY, minor mechanics, all that was done at home. The 40s was a time of sustainability. There was rations, resources were limited. They made the most of what they had. Nothing was wasted. You all have heard about flour bags being turned into underwear, paper being reused and reused and reused. They made the most of it. Today, there's too much commercial stuff, we just throw it away. There's a button missing, out it goes. Men to make do instead of buying new was the mantra, and perhaps that's what we should be adopting today. So what's the point? What point am I trying to make here? It's quite simple, really. In just 6 years, New Zealand will have a population that includes 1 million people over the age of 65. And not long after that, 25% of the population will be over 65. So we're going to go from 1 million to, 1.5, 2 million over the age of 65. Why aren't we tapping into that knowledge now? Older people know a lot about the local area. They've seen the changes. They can tell you what Caroline Bay looked like 50, 60, 70 years ago. They can tell you what the weather was like then. They can tell you how they gardened, how they farmed, how they grew food, how they coped in an emergency, how they recycled. Now, an example here is at the Croft. I mean, we run a large home. The residents a few years back said, you're throwing out too much stuff, do something about it. So they formed a committee group. We can't that was going out to the tip by 2/3. We won the South Canterbury Business Awards. So that's not a plug for us, although it sounds good. It is it's a plug for the older people who said this is what we want to do. We should have, and I talked to Phil about this quite a bit, we should have communal gardens all over all these lovely parks. Let's get the gardens out there. Having said that, I do know they need to be overseen and managed because people get enthusiastic and then, they run out. So that might be something the council want to think about. There should be cooking classes and sewing classes with some of our older people leading it. Now, we've started this with the Trinity Church, Presbyterian Support Family Works. We've teed up with them and they're going to run some cooking classes for some of our vulnerable people who get food parcels. Because there's only so many ways you can cook mince, so we're going to have cooking lessons and the elders from the church are going to help with that. So we're trying to get the two groups together. And there could be an exchange, older people teaching younger people the skills that they've missed out on. But the younger people can teach the older group the stuff that they don't have, or how to use technology, cell phones, social media, taking an older person out shopping once in a while. There's a wealth of knowledge we should be tapping into. The big challenge, though, is how do we get this group to engage? COVID's forced a lot of people to stay home and a lot of them are still not coming out, so we've got to get this group to engage. And I'll finish off before I get poked. So, Intergenerational Solidarity offers the promise of a more inclusive climate agenda. We need to broaden the youthful momentum to engage and empower the elderly. With decades of life experience and a concern for the world they live in, elders can be a formidable force. So in short, we respond by including the vulnerable and the elderly in the planning and implementation of any changes put forward. We waste enough resources. Let's not waste this resource of knowledge and experience.
Thank you. I'm going to be formidable. That was completely unexpected, actually, your presentation. I thought, we'd be feeling sorry for the poor, vulnerable people. But hey, us oldies have got some use left after all. Thank you, Carolyn. That was really impressive. I appreciated that a lot, and I'm sure everybody else did too. So, next slide, please. Brett King. Brett's another guy who's got a bit of a challenge. You imagine Fulton Hogan, you see big trucks with diesel and you see them spreading bitumen, so that's fossil fuel. Boy, have they got some challenge, a bit like Gary has at Temuka Transport. But if you stick to the end, I've got another form of transport that I think might appeal to both of them. It's part of the final question. But in the meantime, over to you, Gary. Thank you.
Thanks for the kind introduction, Michael. Power of the people, I guess, in our recent employment engagement survey, sustainability and the environment were near the top of the list of things that we needed to do. Our board has spoken, and in line with the commitments made by government, we have aligned ourselves with the Paris Accord. We will be reducing 30% carbon emission reduction by 2030, and we will be net carbon zero by 2050. Our focus is on carbon. Can I? Slide, please. So this is part of our focus on carbon, and you'll see out to the right, it is time to act for us. These are some of the steps that we are taking to get there. Heavy machinery, let's start with local diesel. Biodiesel is something that we've had in our fleet since 2016. Reusable heavy machinery purchases. We have recently taken delivery of the largest commercially available hybrid excavator in the world. Process heat, energy and optimisation, and this is a shout out to the local district councils, Timaru, Waimate and Mackenzie, the first local authorities in the country to be accepting of low temperature grade emulsions, which means we are only heating that the product that goes on the road to 85 degrees instead of 160 degrees. So if you think about the energy input that goes into that. We're also... sorry, can I get the carbon one first, please? Yeah, carbon footprint. So process heat and energy optimisations. We're also using modern emulsifiers instead of the old-fashioned diesel and kero diluents. The net effect of that is that what you see during the summer is a complete lack of bleeding, or what they call flushing on the roads. So whether you have noticed that over the last 4 or 5 years, that is something that the local authorities in this area have been very proactive with. So congratulations to them. Energy efficient asphalt production. There will be a business case going to our board in 2023 for a new asphalt plant. We take delivery of one of the first 20 hydrogen trucks into the country in late 2022. That'll be on our Tauranga to Auckland bitumen run. Each one of those trucks, when they do come into the country, will have the ability of saving over 1 tonne of carbon per day. Our cars and SUVs will be 50% clean fueled by 2025. We're saying bye-bye to utes and welcome the hybrids. Carbon neutral quarry. Our first carbon neutral quarry hopefully is a work in progress at our Royden in Christchurch. Some things we can't avoid, but we're certainly doing our best. Measurement by carbon dashboards. I can tell you we have a dashboard, and we measure the carbon footprint of every vehicle in our fleet in the country, which is no mean effort. So I can sit here, put my hand on the heart and say that Stephen Brett King's motor vehicle uses 75 grams of carbon per kilometre. So that's no mean task to actually measure that. Perhaps go back a slide. You all right? No, this one will do. We can talk to that one. This is a wee bit of a push from our people. Saying what are we doing? We are proud supporters of the Tākehei program throughout the country. We are committed to waste reduction, water conservation. I won't go through all of this, but you can see by 2030 there are a number of initiatives that our people within the company are asking us to pursue. And again, this has been backed up and supported by our board at a higher level. And our last one, the sustainability. And there are things that we can all do, whether you're a road worker or a manager within the company. There are a number of initiatives that we're taking. I talk about Think Electric. We're just replacing a bridge out at Farm Road. We committed to making that site as clean as possible. The vehicles travelling, or one of the vehicles travelling to the site is 100% electric. We had a small electric excavator on site. All the power tools we used on site were battery as opposed to generator driven. And our site container was, again, 100% solar powered, and it was actually credit to the guys that have actually got that one going. We share our stories, we let everyone else know what's going on. We're trying to minimise air travel. That was certainly possible during COVID, and certainly the use of Teams has made the commitment to doing less and less travel around the country. So, look, overall, I do believe that as a company, as you rightly say, we have a lot of trucks, we burn a lot of fossil fuels, we use a lot of fossil fuels. Certainly not being made easy at the moment with some of the commitments that have been made by government. The closure of Marsden Point means that we are now on a 100% imported bitumen model instead of a self-production in New Zealand, and that raises its own challenges by itself. So thanks very much for having me.
So there's another local industry really going for it, and as I said, I was blown away when I discovered all this as I spoke to the different companies around our area. I sort of get a feel that maybe South Canterbury is ahead of the rest of the country. I don't know. It's something we need to look into. Okay, one of the questions that came through was, will the central city development focus on creating green spaces and sustainability? Now that's really something for the council themselves, rather than for one of our speakers, but I thought I'd just put this answer up anyway. The strategic framework for Timaru City Centre is explained. There's a website there. It includes this outcome around healthy Timaru, looking after the natural environment. And so the point of this is that green spaces and sustainability ideas are definitely feeding into the city-town strategy for the centre of Timaru. It's right up there in the agenda for the team that's working on that. Next speaker is Mark Adams. Mark's chair of the Catchment Collective South Canterbury. It's a cluster of 8 catchment groups. He's had lots of roles around South Canterbury. You probably all know him anyway. With the Community Trust, Rural Support Trust, he's been a beef and sheep farmer, and he's going to tell us what farmers and catchment groups are doing, I think. Is that right? And he's just had a fantastic holiday in Europe. I'm jealous. He's a tramper, aren't you?
I am.
He had a great time.
Yes, I did. Thank you. Thanks, Phil. Thank you, everybody. As Nigel outlined previously, living here in South Canterbury means that we live in a region that is a powerhouse in primary production. From the Mackenzie Basin to the extensive foothills and rolling downs and onto the more intensive plains, we have invested heavily into our province with capital, sweat and emotion. We're all part of an industry that, according to MPI last year, provided 83% of New Zealand's merchandise exports. We have evolved into a community that is town plus country. We're interdependent. And given that our fates are so entwined, it is totally reasonable to expect that we will ask hard questions of each other's behaviour. Having recently spent 3 months in Europe, it seems that while we were in lockdown, the world has moved on. Overseas consumers are asking harder questions of the sustainability of the food they eat. They want to know that their food is coming from an environment that is being respected and is low carbon. They perceive that New Zealand is a leader and an innovator in the production of safe food. They know we live a long way away and want to know that we take climate change seriously. We do. As the retiring and unpaid chair of the Environmental Reference Group for Beef and Lamb New Zealand, I've been privileged to be at the pointy end of some very weighty conversations, and we're working very hard to understand the impacts of our farming systems and how we might drive positive change. Every lever we pull in a complex biological system has consequences and costs. But adapting our food production systems into the future is going to be very important, but it's also going to cost a lot of people a lot of money, and we need to get this right. The newly formed South Canterbury Catchment Collective was born out of the desire to help farmers and our communities address current environmental concerns. We believe that forming community catchment groups is the best way to address the uniqueness of each catchment and its people. Joining a community catchment group is to start an educational journey and is a great place, as per Carolyn's comments, for the young and the old to engage. On farm, issues like freshwater, biodiversity, greenhouse gases, afforestation, winter grazing are all interconnected, and when doing a farm plan need to be considered together. Farm plans can feed into catchment plans, and more data will be mined. As we become better informed about our patch, the quality of our conversations and our decisions should improve. It's early days for the collective as we chase MFE and MPI for funding, and we're still to get real runs on the board, but the concept is working well around New Zealand. Decisions being made from the grassroots up versus the top down are more likely to be owned. Communities getting on the front foot and not waiting for some third party to determine their fate appeal to me. Negative energy, if managed, will drive innovation. And we've always had problems to solve. And the challenge for us is not to move to a prescriptive model, but to nurture a culture of innovation. The collective's vision of success is a shared ethic of community care that will create a mosaic of high-quality biodiversity and water resources embedded in a productive and diverse rural landscape. In the meantime, by the end of this year, all farmers are required to know their greenhouse gas number Currently, that's 75% of farmers, or 18,000 farmers have gone on and done their numbers. And by the end of 2025, all farmers must have a plan in place to manage their greenhouse gases. All relevant information all relevant and current information, because this is a fast evolving conversation. But all relevant information can be found on our industry body websites, and also the Climate Change Commission website. Thank you.
I think that was Mark, wasn't it? Yeah. Thank you, Mark. That was superb. Yes, I'm on the Pariora Catchment group, and there's some really good people out there trying to make a difference, trying to make a positive difference. Thank you. So, next slide. Oh, sorry, Mark, I meant to ask you this question. Are there any tools available to help farmers and other landowners to understand the predicted impacts of climate change on their land?
Yeah, the tools are being developed by our levy-funded organisations, because it's all about separating the noise and breaking it down to what can I do. When it comes to greenhouse gases, freshwater, biodiversity, in order to drive change, you have to become very specific very quickly. And to empower people, it's working through what is it that I can do right now to take control of my own fate. So the levy-funded organisations are working on this. In regards to South Canterbury, I would look north. During the 70s, I learnt to ice skate on our duck ponds at home. And now I can't remember the last time that I saw my duck ponds frozen. And I was talking to a good friend in the Bay of Plenty who said, well, he grew up in the 60s and 70s and he never saw a frozen pond at all. And so I would be looking north to see what the farming systems were like up there as we move into a warming phase. I would also challenge the local council and the structures to start also, because of the TDC has a strong provincial connection, to start actually workshopping with the right folk what some of the stuff's going to look like. That's going to be a challenge for us all.
It is. I think what Mark says there aligns with one of the mantras of the permaculture industry, and the question was asked, what is the most important book for permaculture, if you're going to do permaculture, which is permanent agriculture, like having a food forest? And the answer to the question was a notebook. So it's not a case of learning what everybody else is doing, it's understanding our piece of land, exactly our bit of land and what will work on that bit of land, not on some research station somewhere else. We can learn from what's elsewhere, we've got to adapt it to our local conditions. Right, Felicity Bruce is an apology tonight with a very genuine reason. She badly hurt her back and is unable to be here tonight, but she wishes us well. So a number of you may know Felicity. She owns Cocoon Hair Design, and her company has worked on sustainability issues for quite a number of years, and she has won award after award after award. So here's a small business that's been on board for sustainability, environmental management and climate change for a long time. It's a pity she's not here. She had a most artistic presentation, it'll be fair to say. I can't give it the colour she could give it, but we wish her well, and I'm going to move on to the next speaker. So sorry about that, Felicity. Right, there we go. I jumped one. Justine Carson-Iles. Some of you will know her from Forest and Bird. She leads the Kiwi Conservation Club, comes from a keen outdoors family. And I left it open to Justine to talk about whatever she wanted to because I knew it would be a boomer. So Justine, over to you. No pressure. That's the right-hand button.
Thanks, Phil. Actually, he wrote, I'm leaving you to last because you're the most, you'll be excite everyone. And I was like, thanks for that, Phil. So, yeah, I think I've got the magic. Cool. So I come to you tonight, this is my little whānau, but I come tonight speaking as a high school teacher. I'm in Mountainview and I am part of Forest and Bird and also coordinate the Kiwi Conservation Club here in South Canterbury. But this is us up in Kōhuro, or Kurau if you would like, adventuring in the winter. So yeah, I do come from a bit of an adventurous family, but today it's about what do I do and how do I engage the youth. So I've got a lot of pictures, which I thought would be quite nice to finish on. So I help co-coordinate, co-conspire the Kiwi Conservation Club with Wynne, and she's in the audience tonight. And we run monthly meetings for young people, so sort of ages 7 to 11, but in saying that it's sort of birth to 15, depending on the kids. And actually, I think a lot of our adventures are for the parents, not for the children. So, and we get out in nature. So here we are down in the Waitaki and out at Pioneer Park adventuring. So we just get out in nature on a Sunday afternoon and I guess just explore and be in nature and get out there. And lots of speakers tonight have been talking about nature. And for me, it's essential for my well-being. So yeah, I like to share that. Here we are down at the beach, finding all sorts of treasures, trying to identify things in activity. You know, every topic that you can think of in nature, we're game. Wynne and I are game to have a go. So cool. We run camps as well, so annual camps on the South Canterbury or the Queen's Death weekend, down South Canterbury Anniversary weekend. We're not going this year. We're mourning. No, we're not. Sorry. So these are 2 of our camps that we've been to. So families come. It's very whānau based. And just be out in nature and sharing it. And for me, it's just amazing because I come from, my family has always been camping and tramping and sailing. But for me, a lot of families just haven't been out in nature. And so for me, it's about sharing that. So yeah, it's about sort of imparting lifelong learning and learning something different and exploring your backyard because a lot of families haven't. Here we are down in Waimeri, speaking about moa and elephant rocks. Okay, and some of our little faces in a large tree trunk at Peel Forest. So yeah, cool. So my other hats are based out at high school. So I've been teaching almost 20 years at high schools, and my extracurricular was never hockey or rugby. It was always environmental. So this year at Mountainview, we're running a level 1, 2 and 3 environmental studies class and doing achievement standards based on environmental studies. So this is Kat and Alicia. I'm hoping that you've possibly heard of them recently. They're on a bit of a rampage, would be the best word for it, around period poverty and getting sort of free sustainable products to students in schools. And they've been extremely passionate around that. And I've had other students looking at cycling, and we've been liaising with the Timaru District Council on their strategies around that as well. That's Gareth, he's been surveying the public, asking them values. And then we've been working on waste because we have lunch in schools, and we have this big vision at the moment to create a massive circular system that involves all that compostable material going into the compost and the chickens, and then the chickens creating us lunch, and then it going in the background. Not the chickens, maybe the eggs. Cool. Yeah, great. So this is a multi-level class I'm running at the moment. I've got about 20 students. We're focusing on an action. This is where the projects come from. Also looking at different attitudes and values, and a lot of local content. We've been looking at the Pariora River actually last week. Okay. I also at lunchtimes once a week run Environmental Council. This is an extracurricular, and the students just come and if they want, and we just do environmental things. So this is us running a couple of beach cleanups. My kids are in this photo too, they're not high school kids. So beach cleanups, what else do we do? Planting, we've got some gardens at school. We've germinated some natives and planted them as well. Just, get engaged. And I've still got students that I've had eco-councils with 15 years ago that I'm in contact with. Okay, cool. I'm also teaching ag this year. There's a few other subjects as well. But anyway, agriculture this year as well with the year 11s, which has been quite a challenging year group. But it's been great because, talking about, older people being really knowledgeable in those kind of skills, this is what I've been doing with my year 11 students this year, is getting out in the garden with them and planting broccoli and them not eating the broccoli, but we all eating the broccoli. But, just experience, where's our food come from and how does it get there? So we also have a year 12 and year 13 agribusiness class as well. So, yeah, cool. We've been involved with School Strike for Climate, and in 2019, Mountainview, I had a very quiet student come to me and say, I would like to run the strike in Timaru, and away we went. And we had hundreds of people, or a good 100 or so people come and join us from all ages and all schools and organisations and businesses, and it was just amazing. It was just amazing, and my students were ridiculously freaked out, but they were amazing. So it's so inspiring. Kaia, tonight you're inspiring, but I work with these guys every day too, and it's just amazing. I'm getting a bit emotional around that too. Okay, cool. And then I throw it in my teaching. So someone mentioned earlier tonight about it not being in the curriculum, and it is in the curriculum. It's in the social sciences. It's in every curriculum to encourage sustainability. However, as a teacher, if you don't have that knowledge or that skill, then it's harder for you to teach that and impart that. For me, it's in every topic that I teach, I infiltrate. But there is a whole curriculum for environmental ed as well, or education for sustainability. So for me, I squeeze that in everywhere. So here we are on a field trip. We were out at the Pariora last week as well, surveying, and we're just having a look and comparing two sites. This is Lindisfarne, and then down at Brussels Bridge, down your neck of the woods, and comparing things and discussing the in-between. So that's what we're up to. So my final slide was, sorry, a little bit political as well, but the youth do care, and they actually do understand, and they just want, because we spoke about this earlier, they can't vote and they can't make change, but they just want us to do what we say we were going to do, and that would be, we know what we need to do, we just need to do it, and it is their life, their future. So that's got a bit emotional for me, but thank you. That's me.
Well, that was really from the heart, wasn't it? Think of the number of people that Justine is influencing over the years. She's been a teacher. A real privilege to have Justine in our community. We're just about finished, so I'm just going to do a quick summary. We've heard about the science and impacts of climate change, managing climate anxiety, what others are already doing, and there's an awful lot going on. So climate action is becoming the new normal. It's just normal for Fulton Hogan. It's just normal for Presbyterian Support. It's what they do now. And it's becoming normal for a lot of individual people as well. But exactly what can we do down here? And that's where we need to have a strategy. So you've heard from a whole lot of speakers. Now we've got to hear from you, because you know the issues. You know how the Pariora Valley has changed. You know how the beaches have changed. You know what grows well in particular parts of town or out in the country. So we need your input. So how do we get that? So we're going to have some drop-in sessions. Tomorrow morning, Timaru Library, 9:30 till 12, and then the next couple of... just the 22nd, so that's tomorrow, and then the 4th of October, we'll have a drop-in at Timaru. Geraldine Library, Wednesday 28th, 1 till 3:30. Temuka Library, 29th, 9 till 11:30. Either Reese or I or both of us will be there, and we want to hear your stories. And then we're going to run 2 workshops down at the new Eco Centre, Wednesday 26th of October, another evening one, and Saturday the 29th. So the little pieces of paper that were on your seats that outlines what's going to be happening. And there's a couple of questions on the back, or one particular question around who pays for climate adaptation. We know the science, we know the engineering. The hard bit is the human bit. Who pays? Because if central government pays, that's us paying. If local authorities pay, that's us paying. And if the person who's losing their house is paying, clearly they're paying. So are we going to be a community that just lets the poor person that loses their house just pay for it? Or are we going to collectively say, no, this is for all of us. We've all got to be part of the solution. So that's the sort of things we want to hear at these workshops. So make action, climate action, your new normal. And I come up with this little phrase, double the good, halve the bad. Don't care what you do more of the good stuff and less of the bad stuff. And what we find is the more good stuff you do, the more you feel inspired to do even more good stuff. And that's what we're hearing from some of the speakers tonight. Another option is to join us in what we call an advisory group. So Jacob, you there, Jacob? They're at the back. Jacob's at the back. If you would like to join an advisory group, please see Jacob and we'll collect your details. And the advisory group is really just a sounding board for people like Reece and myself and others who are trying to drive this strategy. We'll meet every couple of months for 2 or 3 hours, and the idea is you challenge our thinking. And we'd love to have people from every age, every part of the community on that group. So just register your interest with Jacob down the back. He's got a clipboard there. After those first 2 workshops where we hear from you, we're going to then run a series of workshops that are likely to be on these topics. So there's likely to be one specifically on coastal inundation. Over the next 50 years, we're going to lose $300 million worth of dairy land, 3 settlements, and possibly the main trunk line. It's kind of significant, this inundation stuff, and it's going to have a big impact on the port. Probably workshops on resilience of water supplies, low greenhouse gas emission transport, extreme weather events, and so on. But those topics will depend on what you tell us. So we encourage, and we'll put the dates of those out shortly. So I've got a last question here. We've got a Hilux on the left, and on the right's a little thing called a pod bike. And you can start buying these in Scandinavia now. They're a 4-wheel electric bike, completely enclosed. You have to pedal a little bit, but it's got battery power in it. And you can fit 1 person plus the shopping. Neat little devices. I'd love to get one. So how many trips can you make into town on a pod bike using the same energy as you would use in a Toyota Hilux? Let's try some numbers. Where you go? Over here. 73. Next. 200. 300. And my bid, come on, you've got to go. 350. 1,000 over here. Keep going. 1,500 over here. 1,500. Keep going. 5,000's too high. 3,000 close. Sorry? I heard 3, I heard 4. It's in between those 2. Who said that? Bingo. It's near enough. 3,800 trips on one of those things. I want one. So Gary and Fulton Hogan, Brett, got the name right there. There's a new vehicle for you. Okay, so 3,800 trips. That's every work day for 19 years. That's how many trips. It's astonishing, isn't it? So I can't even get on the waiting list to buy those because just in Scandinavia the waiting list is so high the company can't keep up with demand, and they've got a second short list for people from Germany. So here's a question: should we build something like that in Timaru? Yeah, I reckon we. So what other ideas have we got for Timaru? I mean, something like that could cut our emissions absolutely enormously, and the roads would need to be made kind of a bit safer. But I think it could be quite exciting. So if you've got ideas, come to our future events. And I'm just going to end by thanking you for coming tonight. You know, you've been here for a long time. I really appreciate that. You've had a lot of energy. I thank our speakers. They've been fantastic. We had some great insights. I don't feel as useless as an old person now as I used to. So thanks, Carolyn. Thanks to McCain's Foods. Timaru District Council, I really thank you very much for that, because Timaru District Council recognise that most of the climate action has to be outside the council, and they're supporting this. They're saying, let's develop that strategy for us, our strategy. So thanks, Timaru District Council. Thanks for the support team on audiovisuals and catering and helpers who've been wandering around. Please share your ideas at our future workshops. Join our advisory group, double the good and halve the bad. Back to Nigel. Thank you.
Alrighty, thanks so much. What a wonderful evening, and 3 hours and we've all stayed awake. Not bad for sitting on our bums. I'm not over 60, but I am an elected member, so I also put myself into the vulnerable category. So it's also nice to know that we're not useless, remember that. But hey, what a wonderful evening. A special thanks and a round of applause to both Phil and Reese who have put this together. Great to see their passion. And a special thanks to all the speakers that have joined us online, but also, great to see those stories from locals who are really making a difference. And I think that's the key thing to this. The point that Phil emphasised before, it's not just Timaru District, it's us as a whole community making a difference. So thank you very much, and I'll pass on to Barbara.
Kia ora, thanks Nigel. What a great night. It's been fabulous. Thank you so much. Just a couple of words. He mahi kai takata, he mahi kai hoaka. Anything worthwhile requires effort. And so we've heard some really good ideas about the things we can do. Some of them will be difficult and some of them will be easy. The most important thing is we start doing them now. And as Phil said, we double the good and halve the bad. So I'm just going to close with a short karakia, and then everyone will be able to go home. Anuhia, anuhia, anuhia ki te uru tapanui, kia wātia, kia mama, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua I te ara takata. Koia rā e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia tina, tina, pomie, hui e, tai ki.